Today's video, we're going to go through Introduction to SQL Server Performance Counters. I had a question from a viewer, wanted to know all about SQL Server Performance Counters and how you use them to monitor and tune SQL Server. So we're going to just do a little intro on this today, and we could dig into it more if you guys have specific questions. So a few tidbits of information. So what happens is when you install SQL Server on a server, you will get a bunch of performance counters that get added to the default set of performance counters that Performance Monitor will allow you to uh, display and monitor in the interface. And also you can run these traces in the background and collect the information and store the files and things like that. So just some quick examples of what you can monitor. There's a lot more than what I've listed here. You've got batch reads per second, where basically you could just see the number of requests that come into SQL Server every second. Then you got compilations per second, so the number of statements that get compiled per second. Then there's a bunch of disk performance counters, such as disk reads per second and disk writes per second. And what you do is you use these performance counters. What you do is view the performance over time or store those results somewhere in a file or in the database or something like that so you can view things over time. And just one thing I'll add is that a lot of these counters are cumulative from when SQL Server starts. So in order to really make meaning out of them over time, you have to store the value, store the new value, and then compute the difference between them to see what's happening over a time period. All right, so let's just bring up Performance Monitor. So what you'll see in Performance Monitor, got some default settings that come up, but you just come in and you can say add counters. And then what you can do is, what I said was there's a bunch of MS SQL objects that get added in here when you install SQL Server. So as I said, you've got execution statistics. You can get database level statistics. You can get information about the buffer, so you can get like your page life expectancy. Let's just grab that one. And when you're in Performance Monitor, you can either view like via a graph or by a report. Doesn't look like it actually added our page life expectancy. Let's go back and add that. So there's a lot of information in here, so there's a lot to navigate. So what I would suggest is as you're adding things, don't try to get too aggressive. Maybe just look up a few things at a time. And so as you can see here, now we're getting this value. And it'll graph it over time. The problem with the graphing is that it gets kind of jumbled up. If you've got a lot of things you're monitoring, everything kind of gets lost in the shuffle. So I like to focus in on one or two things and have them graphed. So actually, let's go back to the reports. So you can remove things from here. So I'm going to try and remove everything except maybe our page life expectancy. Okay, so now we get a clean graph over time. And as you can see, this is a lot simpler to read than everything. That's why I suggest that we just focus on a couple of things and have them getting displayed in our graph. Okay, so that's how you would get at the information in Performance Monitor. But SQL Server actually has some dynamic management views that allow us to access this information using SQL. So I'd like to show you that as well, and that might actually be a lot more useful. So here there is a view in the database, Dynamic Management View, DMOS Performance Counters. And if you query that, you'll see almost 2,000 metrics that it's basically keeping for you on a real time basis. So you have to kind of go through here and look at each one of these individually. As I said before, some of them are cumulative since SQL Server started, and so you have to do some sort of calculation to make meaning out of them. So, for example, if you've got a metric that is just a cumulative value and you're polling it once per hour, then you would need to subtract the value from one run to the next to see how much has gone on in the past hour. But then there's a lot of other ones that are already calculating that. Anything where you see requests per second, anything with a denominator of per second, they're already factoring that out for you. And so you don't have to do that math in order to make meaning out of them. So there's a lot of information in here. Basically, everything that we were seeing in Performance Monitor that we're able to select is being collected here. And so since we're more familiar with using SQL to do this sort of analysis, this is a this is something that we can use, I think, a lot more, and it'd be a lot more useful than collecting graphs or looking at graphs in Performance Monitor. So again, I'm just doing an aggregation here so you can see by object how many values are available. As you can see, some of them are in the hundreds that you can access. So what you could do in order to do analysis is direct the output of these queries to a table. So here I've got an example. I'm going to create a table named perf counters. I'm just going to grab everything and I'm going to add a capture date on there. So what that allows me to do is tell me when exactly I got this information. So I'm going to run a query from the table I just created. And you'll see I've got all the information and then I've got a capture date slapped on the beginning of it. So what that allows me to do is, let's say I put a job or something like that runs this query, directs the output to the table, and it runs once per hour. And so now all of a sudden I've got a repository of the performance counters that I can do analysis on. And that's a very powerful thing. So that's your homework, is probably to go and start looking at these individual performance counters and seeing how you can do some sort of analysis over time so that you can assess the performance of your server. That's it for today. Hey, I appreciate you guys watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, and comment. Drop your questions below, and I'll see you guys next time.